Brother teacher, here recently, within the past 48 hours, I watched the news and to my dismay, but also to my non amazement, was a breaking news story about the shooting of a black man in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that took place approximately 2 years ago. And the findings of an investigation by the police department, uh, more respectfully, it was the Attorney General's office of Louisiana. And the two police officers that were in question for the shooting, they were both basically exonerated. They were found not guilty, and there were no charges filed in that case. What happened uh, around 2016 was there was a black man that was alleged to have been in an argument with someone, and this person or someone else that was witnessing this altercation verbally called the police, and they stated that that man had a gun. The caller stated that the individual in question had a gun, and they described that person. And that man, as we know today, his name was Alton Sterling. So, two police officers arrived at the location, and it happened to be the outside of a local convenience store. Alton Sterling had been selling CDs outside of this store for many years, and he was personally known by the owner. So he was within his rights to be standing outside selling CDs as he normally did. But something, in my estimation, inappropriately occurred. There was someone, first of all, there with a video camera or a phone, and they filmed police arrive. These two police officers jumped out the car, and they basically tackled Alton Sterling to the ground. Didn't have a conversation with him, were not civil at all, didn't ask his name and his identification or anything. They tackled him to the ground. And to have them say it, and people who represent that organization said, they will say that he was resisting. Maybe I'll address that in a moment, the resisting part. But anyway, they tackled him to the ground, and he's in shock. He's wondering what's going on. And so he's on the ground, and he's struggling. He's not trying to harm them, but he's struggling because it's two big men on top of him, even though he was a big man relatively as well. So one police officer says, gun. He has a gun. At this point, especially when you look at the video, you will see that police officer reach back and pull his own firearm out, and he murdered Alton Sterling. I'm not going to be nice about it. He murdered that man. And he shot him, according to the record, 6 times in the chest, killing him. And yes, he did have a gun. It was in his pocket. He made no attempt at any point to reach for the gun. None. But there are some that were saying that he was resisting. And that's what I want to touch on in just a second. But anyway, these two police officers, 2 years later, within the past 48 hours, the Attorney General for the state of Louisiana made the news statement that these police officers did nothing wrong, that they followed procedures as far as it related to him having a weapon on him and him resisting, supposedly resisting, and they did the appropriate thing. On some level, I could read between the lines and I could see that that attorney general was struggling with the answer. He was trying to be neutral and not actually take any side. What a coward. He forestated that he was not going to try to argue police policy and so forth, and whether or not they followed proper protocol. And he only addressed the issue of them being on the ground. So here's what I was going to say about the melee or the so-called confrontation on the ground. First of all, there's standard operational procedure in most major organizations, and the police departments of this nation are no different, and even across the world. You don't just jump out of your car as a police officer because you got a phone call. There are phone calls, hundreds and hundreds of phone calls to 911 dispatchers every single day, and all of them are not legitimate. Some of them are just opinions. They are. It is up to that police officer when they arrive on the scene to assess. And upon assessing, you make a determination or you respond according to the situation. Sterling didn't attack those police officers. Sterling did not reach for the weapon that was in his pocket. He did have a so-called criminal history. But what did that have to do with that incident? Nothing at all. This is what police or law enforcement are so quick to do, and attorneys and prosecutors are so quick to do, especially when you're a black man. They go through the database and find out if you have any priors to substantiate their claim that you did something wrong at that particular instance. We know that game, and it is a game. But anyway, they did not approach him, as I said before, in a civil and meaningful and appropriate manner. If they felt that that man there had a gun, why did only two of them show up? Why could they have not stood back and observed before being so hastefully aggressive, if you will, and attacking this man, taking him to the ground and using as their cause of action, we found a gun on him. That's why we did what we did. You should have not touched him in the first place in that manner. And this sort of is paralleled by the Eric Garner situation in New York, when he was choked to death by police officers. Same situation. He had no weapon. He's a big burly guy. He lives in New York. He's standing there on the sidewalk. They approach him. They claim that he was selling loose cigarettes or whatever. He denied it. And he said, I'm tired of you all. He's expressing himself verbally. I'm tired of you all harassing me. You keep coming out here harassing me, and I'm not bothering anybody. That's what he said. Before someone took it upon themselves from the police department to go around behind him and put him in a chokehold and wrestle him to the ground, which was against police policy. Now, to this day, Eric Garner is now dead as a result of that action. But do you see what I'm saying? They didn't talk to him like a citizen. They didn't talk to him by giving him the benefit of the doubt. Whatever happened to that statement that I grew up with as a little boy, and so did you all, girls and boys, when you grew up, you see this statement on police vehicles, and they would cascade this all over your city. Police to protect and serve. Protecting and conserving, protecting and and serving the community. What happened to that? These police officers did not perform anywhere near that ideology, protecting and serving. They were like they were in a street fight that they caused. I can go on and on and on. And I can talk about the gentleman that lost his life in Arizona to the police officer at the hotel. And he was begging for his life. And he was a white gentleman, 26 years old. Now his wife is left behind along with his 2 daughters. And he was murdered in the hallway of a hotel in Arizona. Go figure. So, getting back to the Alton Sterling situation. It incenses me. It makes me upset. It pains me to constantly, we're not talking about remote situations or isolated events, but it pains me to see so many situations where police officers kill black men, and when it is video recorded and the evidence is exhibited, when it is presented, it as if it was never shown. The result is as it had never been seen. It's obvious that the police officers did something wrong, that it was inappropriate. But they always, almost always, 99% of the time, walk away free. What do you think about this? This is Brother Teacher.